Go without me. Daniel Mercer stopped halfway up the airplane stairs. For 1 second, he thought the noise from the runway had swallowed Claire's words. He turned slowly. She was standing below him on the wet pavement, surrounded by passengers pulling suitcases toward the plane. But Claire had no suitcase. No carry-on. Nothing. Just tears running down her face. Daniel stared at her. Claire. She looked like she was trying not to fall apart. I'm not coming. Daniel stepped down one stair. What? I said I'm not coming with you. A family passed between them. A boarding agent called for passengers to keep moving. Daniel didn't hear any of it. Because 3 hours earlier, Claire had been laughing beside him at the airport cafe. 3 hours earlier, she had been talking about where they should put the sofa in their new apartment in Seattle. 3 hours earlier, she had kissed him and said, "This is the beginning of our life." And now she was standing beneath an airplane, telling him to leave without her. Daniel tightened his hand around the handle of his suitcase. Claire, what happened? She shook her head. Nothing happened. That's not true. Daniel, please. No. You don't get to say go without me after 3 years, and then tell me nothing happened. Claire looked at him, and Daniel would remember that look for the rest of his life. It wasn't anger. It wasn't uncertainty. It looked like grief. Stay with this story until the very end, because what Daniel believed happened at that airport was completely wrong. Claire was hiding something so painful that she was willing to let the man she loved hate her for years rather than tell him the truth. And when Daniel finally discovered what she had sacrificed for him, the biggest shock wasn't why she stayed behind. It was what his own father had secretly done years earlier. If you enjoy emotional stories about love, family, sacrifice, and second chances, like this video, subscribe, and tell me in the comments. Could you ever forgive someone who broke your heart to protect you? Now listen carefully, because Claire was about to tell the first lie that would change both of their lives. Daniel came down another step. I'll get off. Claire's head snapped up. No. I'll get my bag. We'll go somewhere and talk. No, Daniel. I'm not getting on this plane while you're standing there crying. You have to. He stared at her. You're ending our relationship, and somehow you're worried about me missing my flight. Claire swallowed. This job matters. You matter more. That nearly destroyed her. She looked away. Daniel's voice softened. Claire. She couldn't look at him. Come here. She shook her head. Please. No. Daniel came down another step. Claire stepped backward. His expression changed. Why are you moving away from me? Because if he reached her, she knew she would fail. If Daniel touched her, she would tell him everything. She would tell him about the hospital. She would tell him about his father. She would tell him about the doctor's warning. And Daniel would never board that plane. So Claire did the cruelest thing she had ever done. She looked directly at him and said, I don't love you enough to leave my life for you. Daniel went still. Claire felt as if she had stabbed herself. But she continued. I thought I did. Stop. I was wrong. Claire. I don't want Seattle. Then we won't go. Her heart nearly broke. Daniel continued. I'll call them tonight. No. We'll stay here. No. Several people turned. Claire lowered her voice. You can't do that. Why? Because this is your dream. And you are part of it. She closed her eyes. Daniel looked at her for several seconds. Then he asked the question she had been dreading. Is there somebody else? Claire opened her eyes. No. Then what is this? I changed. In 3 hours? She had no answer. Daniel's face hardened. Tell me the truth. I am. No, you're not. She looked toward the plane. Daniel, go. Say it properly. What? If you want me gone, say it. Claire stared at him. Don't do this. Say you want me to leave. The boarding agent called again. Daniel didn't move. Claire's lips trembled. She whispered, Go without me. Daniel looked at her for a long time. Then he nodded once. Not because he understood. Because something inside him had broken. He turned. He pulled his suitcase up the remaining stairs. Claire watched every step. At the top, Daniel paused. For 1 second she thought he might turn around. He didn't. The airplane door closed. Claire stood there long after the passengers disappeared. Then her knees nearly gave out. An airport worker approached. Ma'am, are you okay? Claire covered her mouth. She couldn't answer. Because somewhere above the clouds, the man she loved would spend the next several hours believing she had stopped loving him. And inside Claire's handbag was a hospital wristband with the name Robert Mercer printed across it. Daniel's father. The man who, less than an hour earlier, had begged Claire to make sure Daniel got on that plane. Daniel Mercer had spent almost his entire adult life being responsible for someone. When he was 22, his mother died after a long illness. He nearly dropped out of college. His father refused to let him. Robert Mercer had driven through a snowstorm to Daniel's university, found him sitting alone in a dormitory laundry room, and told him, "You finish what you started." Daniel did. He became an architect, not the kind that designed luxury towers. Daniel wanted to build hospitals, rehabilitation centers, and community clinics, buildings that made sick people feel less afraid. He said it came from spending too much time in hospitals with his mother. By 39, Daniel was good. Very good. But he had spent years working beneath bigger names. Then a Seattle firm offered him something different. They wanted Daniel to lead a new healthcare design division. It was everything he had worked for. Salary, authority, creative freedom, his own team, the type of opportunity that might only come once. Claire was 37 when she met him. She worked for a nonprofit foundation in Columbus, Ohio. She had lost her mother the year before. She was independent, practical, sharp enough to make Daniel laugh when he was taking himself too seriously. They met in a bookstore cafe when Daniel spilled coffee across a folder of documents she had been reading. He stared at the ruined papers. "Oh no." Claire stared at him. Daniel grabbed napkins. "I can fix this." She looked at the brown coffee spreading across 12 pages. "How?" He paused. "I don't know yet." Claire raised one eyebrow. "You sound very confident for someone without a plan." Daniel smiled. "That has carried me surprisingly far." She laughed. Years later, Daniel would say that was the moment. Not when they first kissed. Not when Claire met his family. Not when she moved half her clothes into his house. That laugh. He wanted to hear it again. They fell in love slowly. Like adults. No dramatic beginning. No wild promises. Coffee became dinner. Dinner became weekends. Weekends became holidays together. Claire became close to Daniel's younger sister, Natalie. And eventually, to Daniel's father. Robert was proud, stubborn, and terrible at asking for help. He had spent decades running a construction business. Daniel believed Robert was comfortable financially. He wasn't. Claire noticed before Daniel did. She noticed Robert cutting his medication tablets. She noticed envelopes he never opened. She noticed the refrigerator was sometimes nearly empty. One Saturday, Claire arrived with groceries. Robert looked offended. "I didn't ask for these." "I know." "Then why did you bring them?" "Because you have mustard, half an onion, and 6 eggs. Robert crossed his arms. "That's food. That's a cry for help." He tried not to laugh. Claire carried the groceries inside. After that, Robert trusted her. Too much, perhaps. Because Robert had secrets. The first was his health. Almost a year before Daniel moved to Seattle, Robert was diagnosed with advanced congestive heart failure. He didn't tell Daniel. He told himself he would eventually. Then Daniel received the Seattle offer. Robert decided he would wait. Every time Daniel asked, "You feeling okay?" Robert answered, "Never better." Claire believed him too. Until the afternoon of Daniel's flight. At 5:18 p.m., Daniel walked across the terminal to buy sandwiches. Claire's phone rang. "Robert." She answered. "Hi, Robert." A woman's voice replied. "Is this Claire Bennett?" "Yes." "This is Dr. Helen Morris at St. Matthew Medical Center." Claire stood immediately. "Where is Robert?" "He was brought in by ambulance." Claire's stomach dropped. "What happened?" "He collapsed at home." "Is he okay?" "He's conscious right now." "I'm coming." Claire looked toward Daniel. He was still standing in the food line. Then the doctor said, "Ms. Bennett, Mr. Mercer specifically asked that we not call his son." Claire frowned. "Why?" "I think you should speak with him." Claire told Daniel she had to make a phone call. Then she took a taxi to the hospital. When she entered Robert's room, she barely recognized him. He looked smaller, oxygen beneath his nose, skin pale. Claire rushed forward. "What happened?" Robert looked toward the door. "Where's Daniel?" "At the airport." "Good." Claire stared at him. "What do you mean, good?" Robert closed his eyes. "You need to go back. Not until somebody tells me what is happening." Dr. Morris explained. "Heart failure. Advanced. Ongoing treatment." Claire turned toward Robert. "You knew?" He said nothing. "How long?" "Claire." "How long?" 10 months. She stepped away from the bed. "Daniel asks about your health every week." "I know." "And you lied." "Yes." "Why?" Robert looked at her. "Because he would stay." Claire stared. Robert continued. "He stayed when his mother got sick. That was his mother. He nearly destroyed his future. He was 22. He hasn't changed." Claire's eyes filled. "That is not your choice to make." "No." Robert's voice cracked. But I am asking you to help me make it anyway. Claire shook her head. No. He has to get on that plane. No. Claire. He deserves to know. If he knows, does he leave tonight? She was silent. Robert nodded. Exactly. He could delay. No. You don't know that. I called his employer. Claire stared. You called Seattle? I wanted to know what he was risking. Robert struggled for breath. They have another candidate. Daniel has until Monday to report. Claire looked down. He can choose. Robert whispered. And when I die 6 months from now, he will spend the rest of his life wondering what would have happened if he had gone. Claire sat. 6 months. Robert looked away. Dr. Morris had been more careful. Robert was not. Maybe less. Claire covered her mouth. Then Robert said, You go with him. Claire looked at him. What? You go to Seattle? You make sure he stays. You can barely sit up. I'll manage. No. I have Natalie. Natalie is in Florida with 2 children and a divorce. Robert's eyes hardened. You are not sacrificing your life for me. Claire stared at him. She had already resigned from her job. She had already packed. She had already given away half her furniture. Her life was supposed to be on that airplane. But she looked at Robert lying in that hospital bed and knew the truth. Someone had to stay. And if Daniel knew, that someone would be Daniel. Claire stood. I'll stay until you're stable. No. It's not a discussion. Daniel will come back. Claire looked at him. No, he won't. Robert's face changed. What are you going to do? Claire didn't answer. She returned to the airport. By the time she reached the plane, boarding had started. She saw Daniel standing on the stairs. And she understood exactly what she had to do. Not convince him to leave. Make him believe there was nothing left to come back for. So she broke his heart. Daniel moved to Seattle alone. For the first week, he called Claire every day. She watched the phone ring. She never answered. He sent messages. Please tell me what happened. Then, if you're scared, I'll come back. Then, I don't care about Seattle. Claire cried reading that one. She deleted the reply she had typed. A week later, just tell me if there's someone else. She responded once. There isn't. Please stop waiting for me. Daniel replied immediately. Then tell me why. Claire never answered. Robert came home from the hospital 9 days later. He was furious to discover Claire had stayed. Pack your things. No. I'm serious. So am I. Daniel needs you. He needs Seattle. Robert looked at her. He needs both. Claire smiled sadly. Then maybe life should have been kinder. She moved into Robert's spare bedroom. At first, she told herself it would be a few weeks. Then his condition worsened. Weeks became months. Claire found another job. Lower salary. Closer to Robert. She drove him to appointments. Argued with insurance companies. Organized medication. Cooked meals he barely ate. And every night, after Robert slept, Claire searched Daniel's name online. 6 months after he left, Daniel's new team won a major design contract. Claire printed the article. Robert found her staring at it. He looks happy. Claire nodded. Robert sat beside her. You should call him. She laughed without humor. And say what? The truth. Now. Yes. So he can come home and spend your last months asking why we lied. Robert looked away. Claire whispered. It's too late. No. It is for the version of us that existed before. Robert died 11 months after Daniel moved. Daniel came home for the funeral. Claire did not enter the church. She sat across the street inside her car. Through the windshield, she watched Daniel help Natalie from a cab. He looked different. Older. Thin. Beautiful in the painful way familiar people sometimes become when they no longer belong to you. Claire gripped the steering wheel. She almost opened the door. Then she saw Daniel turn toward the street. Claire lowered herself in the seat. She cried all the way home. Daniel returned to Seattle believing Claire had not attended because she didn't care. He used that belief like medicine. It made forgetting easier. At least he thought it did. The truth was, Daniel never really forgot her. He simply got better at functioning around the empty space. His career exploded. Within 4 years, he became partner. His hospitals won awards. He bought a condominium overlooking the water. He traveled. He dated. He tried to build a normal life. At 44, Daniel became engaged to Elise Warren, an attorney. Elise was kind, intelligent, patient, and 3 months before their wedding, she asked him something. Do you love me? Daniel laughed nervously. What kind of question is that? The kind that needs an answer. Of course I do. Elise watched him. Then she said, Do you love me, or do you love the fact that I'm not Claire? Daniel's smile disappeared. That night, they talked for 4 hours. 2 weeks later, the The wedding was canceled. No shouting. No betrayal. Elise simply told him, "You deserve to finish grieving the relationship you pretend didn't matter." Daniel hated hearing it, mostly because she was right. Back in Ohio, Claire's life changed after Robert's death too. 3 weeks after the funeral, Robert's attorney called. "There are issues with the estate." Claire assumed he meant medical bills. She was wrong. Robert's financial problems went much deeper. Years earlier, Daniel had opened a small architecture practice with a business partner. The partnership failed. Daniel believed the bank had restructured and written off part of the business debt. That was not what happened. Robert had secretly guaranteed the loan. He had mortgaged his house, then refinanced it, then borrowed against his business assets. Why? Because Daniel's first company would have gone into bankruptcy, and Robert knew Daniel would lose professional opportunities if that happened. So Robert stepped in. Without telling his son, the attorney pushed a stack of papers toward Claire. "These are the guarantees." She stared at the numbers. Robert had not simply died poor. He had died carrying Daniel's old debt. Claire whispered, "Daniel doesn't know?" "No." "Will the bank contact him?" "Possibly." Claire leaned back. "How much is left?" The attorney told her. Her stomach dropped. She didn't have that money. But she had one thing. Her mother's house. A small property outside Dayton. Claire had kept it after her mother died. She never lived there. She couldn't bring herself to sell it. Her mother had planted roses behind the kitchen. Claire had learned to bake in that kitchen. Every Christmas, she visited the empty house just to sit at the table for an hour. It was the last physical piece of her mother she had. The attorney noticed Claire staring at the papers. "You don't have to solve this." Claire looked up. "What happens if nobody pays?" "Robert's house is sold. Remaining assets are liquidated. The lender may attempt to pursue other guarantors." "Daniel?" "Potentially." Claire closed her eyes. If Daniel found out, he would ask why. Then he would discover everything. The hospital. Robert's illness. Claire staying. The airport lie. He would come back. And he would blame himself. For leaving. For Robert's financial ruin. For not being there. Claire knew Daniel. Guilt would destroy him more efficiently than heartbreak ever could. She sold her mother's house. The proceeds covered most of Robert's outstanding debt. Not all. Claire took money from her retirement account. Then a personal loan. She paid the rest. The attorney stared at her after the final transfer. "Why are you doing this?" Claire looked down. "Because none of this was Daniel's choice. Neither was it yours." "I know." "Then tell him." Claire shook her head. "No." Years passed. Daniel became successful enough that his name appeared in magazines Claire sometimes bought and hid in a kitchen drawer. Claire became director of a foundation assisting families with medical crises. People often told her she understood caregivers better than anyone. She never told them why. Then, 8 years after the airport, Robert's old house was sold. Natalie called Daniel. "You need to come home." Daniel was standing inside a half-finished hospital in Seattle. "For what?" "Dad's house." "What about it?" "It's sold." Daniel frowned. "That house was sold years ago." "No." "What do you mean, no?" "It wasn't." Daniel stepped away from the construction noise. "I told the attorney to sell it after the funeral." Natalie was quiet. "Natalie." "The mortgage was settled." "What mortgage?" Silence. Daniel felt something shift inside him. 2 days later, he landed in Ohio. The same airport. He hated the irony. This time there was no Claire beneath the plane. No tears. No one telling him to leave. Daniel went directly to Robert's former attorney. The man placed a thick folder on the desk. Daniel opened it. Loans. Guarantees. Refinancing. Old business documents. His name. Robert's name. Then another name. Claire Bennett. Daniel stopped. He turned a page. Claire Bennett. Another page. Claire Bennett. Payment authorization. Settlement. Transfer. Daniel looked up. "What is this?" The attorney studied him. "You truly don't know?" "Know what?" "Ms. Bennett settled a substantial portion of your father's estate." Daniel stared. "Why?" "She sold property." "What property?" "Her mother's house." Daniel went pale. He remembered that house. Claire had taken him there once. She had shown him pencil marks inside a pantry door where her mother measured her height as a child. Claire had laughed when Daniel suggested renovating the place. "Never. This house stays exactly like this." Daniel whispered. "She would never sell that house." The attorney said quietly. "She did." "Why?" "To clear your father's debt." Daniel's voice rose. "Why would Claire pay my father's debt?" The attorney hesitated. "Because part of it was connected to you." Daniel stared at the papers. Then the attorney explained. The old architecture practice. The bank. Robert's guarantee. The mortgage. Everything. Daniel's breathing became shallow. My father mortgaged his house for me. Yes. I never asked him. I know. He told me the business loan was resolved. It was. By him. Daniel stood. The room suddenly felt too small. Then one sentence stopped him. Ms. Bennett was very determined that you not be told. Daniel turned. What? She believed you would blame yourself. Daniel laughed bitterly. She didn't know me very well, then. The attorney looked at him. I think she knew you extremely well. Daniel drove to Natalie's house. She opened the door. One look at his face, and she knew. You found out. Daniel stared. You knew? Natalie's eyes filled. Daniel, you knew Claire paid Dad's debt? Not at first. What did you know? Natalie stepped aside. Daniel entered. She closed the door. Then Daniel said, Tell me everything. Natalie sat. It started before you left. Daniel remained standing. What started? Dad was sick. Daniel's face changed. What? Heart failure. When? A year before Seattle. Daniel stared. No. He didn't tell you. No. He made me promise. Daniel's voice dropped. When did Claire find out? Natalie began crying. That day. What day? She looked at him. The airport. Daniel stopped breathing. Natalie continued. Dad collapsed that afternoon. The hospital called Claire. Daniel sat down slowly. Natalie told him. The hospital. The diagnosis. Robert begging Claire not to call. Claire returning to the airport. Daniel covered his mouth. She knew? Yes. She knew my father was in a hospital while I was standing on those stairs. Yes. And she told me she didn't love me. Natalie whispered. She was trying to make you go. Daniel jumped up. He had no right. I know. She had no right. I know. I would have stayed. That's why Dad hid it. He was my father. Daniel slammed his hand against the table. Natalie flinched. Daniel immediately looked ashamed. But he was crying now. I should have been there. Natalie stood. Daniel. I should have been there when he died. He didn't want that. I don't care what he wanted. His voice broke. He was dying, Natalie. I know. And I was across the country designing hospitals for strangers while my own father was dying. Natalie shook her head. No. Daniel looked at her. No. You are still missing it. What? Claire didn't stay because Dad asked her to. Daniel froze. Natalie wiped her tears. Dad told her to go with you. What? He wanted both of you gone. Daniel stared. Then why did she stay? Because he couldn't manage alone. Daniel's anger faltered. Natalie continued. She moved into his house. Daniel whispered. No. She took him to every appointment. No. She handled his medication. Stop. She was there when he stopped being able to drive. Daniel covered his face. Natalie's voice softened. She was there at the end. Daniel sank into the chair. And I hated her. Natalie cried. She knew. I sent her messages. I know. I told her she was selfish. Natalie said nothing. Daniel looked up. Why didn't she tell me after he died? Natalie hesitated. Because that wasn't the only secret. Daniel went still. What else? Natalie sat across from him. Dad's debt. I know about the loan. No. There's more. Natalie nodded. Daniel's stomach tightened. Tell me. Natalie took a breath. Dad didn't first borrow that money after your company failed. Daniel frowned. What do you mean? He borrowed before. Daniel stared. Why? Because of you. Daniel shook his head. I don't understand. Natalie reached into a drawer. She pulled out an old envelope. Dad gave this to me before he died. Daniel stared at his name written across the front. His father's handwriting. He said I should only give it to you if the truth ever came out. Daniel's hands shook as he opened it. Inside was a letter. Daniel, if you are reading this, then Claire has probably finally failed at protecting everyone. That would be a good thing. There is something I never told you. Years before your Seattle offer, when you opened your first architecture firm, you almost lost your professional license. Daniel stopped reading. What? Natalie looked down. He continued. Your partner had taken on debt using company accounts without telling you. The bank was preparing legal action. You thought the matter disappeared because your partner settled. He didn't. I did. Daniel's heart pounded. I used the house. Then the business. Then the last of your mother's insurance money. You never knew because I never wanted you to know. You had already spent too much of your life feeling responsible for other people. I wanted you to build something without looking backward. Daniel's vision blurred. Then came the line that changed everything. When Claire found out after I died, She sold her mother's house because the bank could still pursue you for the remaining guarantee. She did not pay my debt. She paid yours. Daniel stopped reading. The room went silent. He looked at Natalie. No. Natalie cried. Daniel returned to the letter. I begged the attorney to tell her not to do it. I was already gone, of course, so that advice arrived through documents I left behind. Claire ignored me. Apparently death did not make her less stubborn. Daniel laughed once through tears, then kept reading. Son, you will want to call what Claire did a sacrifice. It was. But understand what she sacrificed. She did not merely give up Seattle. She gave up the last thing her mother left her, so you would never learn that your dream had cost your father his home. She knew what you would do with that knowledge. You would come home. You would quit. You would spend 10 years trying to repay me. And I never wanted repayment. I wanted you to live. Claire understood that. Maybe better than I did. But I made one terrible mistake. I allowed her to carry the truth alone because I believed she was strong enough. Strength does not make pain lighter. It only makes people less likely to notice you are carrying it. If you find her one day, do not ask her why she stayed. Ask yourself why she believed she had to lose you in order to protect you. And Daniel, do not waste time being angry. Time is the one debt nobody can repay. Dad. Daniel sat motionless. His entire understanding of the last 8 years collapsed. Claire had not merely stayed with Robert. She had not merely paid medical bills. She had not simply comforted a dying man. She had sold the last piece of her mother's life to protect Daniel from discovering that his failed business had financially destroyed his father. And then she let Daniel believe she was selfish. She let him hate her. She let him build a successful life on top of a lie that made her the villain. Daniel whispered, "Where is she?" Natalie hesitated. "Daniel, where is Claire? She asked me never to give you her address." He stared at his sister. "Natalie, you're angry." "Yes." "You're hurt." "Yes." "You may go there and say things you regret." Daniel stood. "I have regretted 8 years already." Natalie looked at him for a long time. Then she gave him the address. Claire worked in a converted brick building on the edge of downtown Columbus. Daniel arrived just before 6. His hands shook on the steering wheel. He sat in the car for several minutes. Then he saw her through the glass. Claire was gathering papers. Her hair was shorter. There were faint lines around her eyes. She looked older. Of course she did. So did he. Daniel pushed open the door. A small bell sounded. Claire looked up. The papers slipped from her hands. Neither spoke. Daniel walked slowly toward her. Claire whispered, "Daniel." He held his father's letter. Her face changed instantly. "You know?" Daniel nodded. Claire closed her eyes. For years, Daniel imagined what he would say if he ever saw Claire again. He thought he would demand answers. Accuse her. Ask how she could throw away 3 years. Now none of those words mattered. He asked, "Why did you sell your mother's house?" Claire looked at him. "Who told you?" "Dad." Her eyes widened. "He left a letter." Claire looked down. Daniel's voice broke. "Why?" She was silent. "Claire, I didn't want the bank coming after you. You could have called me. You would have paid." "Yes." "And then what?" Daniel stared. Claire continued. "You had just started succeeding in Seattle. I would have come back." "I know. You keep saying that like it makes what you did okay. It doesn't." Daniel stopped. Claire looked directly at him. "I know it doesn't." The anger in him shifted. Claire continued. "You should have been allowed to choose." "Yes." "I should have told you your father was sick." "Yes." "I should have told you about the debt." "Yes." She nodded. "But I was afraid." Daniel stared. "Of what?" "Of watching you give up everything again." His jaw tightened. "That was my decision." "I know." "Then why didn't you let me make it?" Claire's eyes filled. "Because your father asked me one question." "What?" "If I told you he was dying, would you still get on that plane?" Daniel said nothing. Claire continued. "And I knew the answer. I would have stayed." "Yes." "I should have stayed." "Maybe." Daniel looked at her sharply. Claire did not take it back. "Maybe you should have." Daniel stared. Claire's voice softened. "That is the part one never let myself say." "What?" "Maybe I was wrong." Silence. Daniel had expected Claire to defend herself. Instead she said, "I spent 8 years telling myself I saved your future." She wiped her face. "But some nights I wondered whether I simply stole a choice from you and called it love." Daniel's anger disappeared completely. Claire continued. "I watched your career. I know." "You know?" "Dad wrote about the cake." Claire covered her face. "Oh God." Daniel almost smiled. "You bought a chocolate cake when I won that hospital award. There were only 2 of us. You and Dad. Yes. And you celebrated without me. Claire laughed through tears. Your father complained the cake was too sweet. He hated chocolate. He ate 2 pieces. Daniel laughed. For 1 second, the 8 years between them disappeared. Then silence returned. Daniel looked around the office. Did you ever marry? Claire looked at him. No. His heart moved. She noticed. Don't. What? Don't make that mean something it doesn't. What does it mean? That life happened. Daniel nodded. I was engaged. I know. You followed me that closely? Claire gave a sad smile. Not proudly. It ended. I heard. Daniel looked at her. Why didn't you contact me? Claire laughed quietly. What would I say? The truth. 8 years late. Yes. Claire looked down. Daniel stepped closer. At the airport. She tensed. When you told me you didn't love me enough. Claire's face crumbled. Daniel. I need to hear it. She cried. Was any of it true? Claire shook her head. No. Daniel closed his eyes. She continued. I loved you so much that I knew if I said your father is in the hospital, you would drop your suitcase and run toward me. I would have. I know. And if you said I need you, you would have stayed. Yes. Claire wiped her tears. So I said the one thing I knew would make you leave. Daniel whispered. That you didn't love me. Yes. He looked away. That sentence ruined me. I know. You don't know. Claire flinched. Daniel immediately regretted it. But she nodded. You're right. He looked at her. I spent years wondering what was wrong with me. Claire covered her mouth. Daniel continued. I thought I wasn't enough. You were. I thought maybe I imagined everything between us. You didn't. I thought I loved someone who could stop loving me in an afternoon. Claire cried harder. I'm sorry. Daniel's own eyes filled. And while I was hating you, you were taking my father to hospitals. Yes. Paying his bills. Yes. Selling your mother's house. Yes. Protecting me from a debt I didn't even know existed. Claire whispered. Yes. Daniel stepped closer. Why didn't you protect yourself? Claire looked at him. And for the first time, she had no answer. Daniel understood. Claire had spent her entire life being useful. Her mother's illness. Her foundation work. Robert. Daniel. She knew how to carry people. She did not know how to ask anyone to carry her. Daniel looked at his father's letter. He wrote something. Claire waited. He said strength doesn't make pain lighter. Claire's lips trembled. It just makes people less likely to notice you're carrying it. She closed her eyes. Sounds like Robert. Daniel looked at her. Were you happy? Claire laughed softly. That is a dangerous question. Answer it. Sometimes. After I left? Yes. Daniel looked surprised. Claire continued. I had friends. Work. Good days. I wasn't sitting in a dark room for 8 years waiting for you. I didn't think that. Good. But were you happy? Claire looked at him. Not in the way I thought I would be. Daniel nodded. Me neither. Silence. Then Claire noticed his wedding ring finger. Empty. She looked away quickly. Daniel saw. I never married. Claire nodded. Elise. We ended it. I'm sorry. I'm not. Claire looked at him. She asked if I loved her, or if I loved the fact she wasn't you. Claire winced. That's terrible. She was right. Daniel, I'm not saying that to pressure you. Then why are you saying it? Because we have spent 8 years lying in the name of protecting each other. Claire stared at him. Daniel continued. I'm tired of it. He put the letter down. I loved you. Claire's eyes filled. I know. No. He stepped closer. I loved you after the airport. She froze. I loved you when I was angry. Claire cried silently. I loved you when I told myself I didn't. Daniel. I loved you when I got engaged to someone else, which is one reason that relationship had no business becoming a marriage. Claire turned away. Daniel stopped himself. He softened. But love doesn't fix what happened. Claire looked back. No. I'm angry. You should be. You hurt me. I know. I'm angry at Dad. I know. I'm angry at myself. Don't be. I left him. He wanted you to. I still left. Claire stepped toward him. Daniel. He shook his head. I need to live with that. You don't have to punish yourself. I'm not. He looked at her. I'm finally admitting it mattered. Claire nodded slowly. Daniel exhaled. I'm supposed to fly back tomorrow. Something flickered across Claire's face. He noticed. She tried to smile. Seattle. Yes. It's a good life. It is. She nodded. I'm glad. Daniel almost laughed. What? That's exactly what you said 8 years ago. Claire frowned. What? You stood beneath an airplane and told me to go because Seattle mattered. Claire looked down. Daniel continued. I think airports have made enough decisions for me. Her eyes lifted. What are you saying? I changed my flight. To when? I don't know yet. Claire stared. I'm not asking you to take me back. Good. Daniel smiled slightly. I deserve that. I'm serious. So am I. He walked closer. I'm asking you to have coffee with me. Claire blinked. Coffee? Yes. That's your big plan? Claire, the last time we made a big plan, you abandoned me on an airport runway. She stared at him. Daniel's eyes widened. That came out wrong. To his surprise, Claire laughed. Really laughed. Daniel stared at her. There it was. The same laugh from the bookstore cafe. The laugh that started everything. Claire wiped her eyes. You still don't know how to make a difficult moment easier. No. Daniel smiled. But I still know how to spill coffee. Claire looked at him for a long time. Then she reached for her coat. There's a cafe across the street. They sat there until closing. At first, conversation was awkward. Then it wasn't. Daniel asked about Robert's final months. Claire told him things he had never known. Robert hated one nurse because she always opened the blinds too early. Robert kept Daniel's architecture articles beside his bed. Robert watched every interview Daniel gave. Once, when Daniel appeared briefly on television, Robert pointed at the screen and told Claire, "He bought that tie with me." Claire had corrected him. "You bought him that tie." Robert replied, "Exactly. That's why it looks good." Daniel cried hearing that. Claire reached across the table and touched his hand. Neither moved. Daniel asked about Robert's final day. Claire hesitated. "You don't have to. I want to know." Claire nodded. It snowed. Daniel smiled sadly. Dad hated snow. He complained. What did he say? Claire's eyes filled. He looked out the window and said, Daniel would complain about driving in this. Daniel covered his mouth. Claire continued. Then he asked if I thought you were happy. Daniel looked at her. What did you say? I said yes. Was I? Claire shook her head. I didn't know. Daniel whispered. Neither did I. They left the cafe after 9. In the parking lot, Claire stopped. Daniel. Yes. If we are going to talk again. He waited. I can't spend the rest of my life apologizing. Daniel nodded. And I can't pretend you didn't hurt me. I know. And you can't punish me every time you're afraid I'll leave. Claire looked at him. Fair. Daniel smiled. And you're never allowed to make a major life decision for me again. Claire almost smiled. Very fair. Daniel extended his hand. Coffee tomorrow? Claire looked at it. Then at him. Tomorrow. She shook his hand. It was ridiculous. After everything. But it was enough. Daniel stayed in Ohio for 6 days. Then returned to Seattle. 3 weeks later, Claire visited. Not to move. Not to restart their old relationship. To see his life. Daniel showed her the hospital he had designed. Claire stood in the lobby beneath a skylight. You did this. Daniel nodded. She looked around. Robert had been right. Daniel belonged there. Claire cried quietly. Daniel noticed. What? She shook her head. Nothing. No more nothing. Claire smiled. I'm proud of you. Daniel looked away. Dad would have liked this place. He did. Daniel turned. What? Claire pulled out her phone. She had saved a photo. Robert, sitting in his chair, holding a magazine open to Daniel's hospital project. Daniel stared at it. Claire whispered, I thought you might want this one day. Daniel took the phone and cried. Their relationship rebuilt slowly. That mattered. There was no magical reunion. No kiss that erased 8 years. They argued. Daniel sometimes became quiet when Claire canceled plans. Claire sometimes became defensive when Daniel asked too many questions. They went to counseling. Daniel learned that his anger toward Claire was mixed with grief for his father. Claire learned that self-sacrifice was not always love. Sometimes it was fear wearing a noble disguise. A year later, Daniel began splitting his time between Seattle and Ohio. Claire never moved simply because he asked. Daniel never expected her to. For the first time, both of them chose. 14 months after Daniel walked into Claire's office, he took her back to the bookstore cafe where they had first met. Claire looked around. You flew me to Columbus for this? I didn't fly you anywhere. You already live here. You know what I mean. Daniel placed 2 coffees on the table. Claire looked suspicious. You didn't spill them. I'm improving. Slowly, Daniel reached into his coat. Claire froze. He placed a small box on the table. Her eyes widened. Daniel, I bought a ring 8 years ago. Claire covered her mouth. I planned to propose in Seattle. Tears filled her eyes. What happened to it? I kept it for 2 years. Claire stared. Then, I sold it. She laughed through tears. That is an awful proposal. I'm not finished. He opened the box. Inside was a simple ring. This isn't the old ring. Claire looked at him. And I don't want it to be. Daniel took her hand. The first ring was for two people who thought love meant making plans together. Claire cried silently. This one is for two people who learned that love also means letting the other person choose. He breathed. I can't give you back 8 years. Claire squeezed his hand. You don't have to. I can't give you your mother's house. No. I can't give Dad back. Her eyes filled. No. But whatever time we do have. Daniel smiled. I'd like to stop spending it without you. Claire laughed through tears. Daniel opened the box fully. Claire Bennett, would you marry me? She looked at him for several seconds, then said, yes. They married 6 months later. Small ceremony. 42 people. Natalie cried before anyone else. At the front was an empty chair. On it sat a photograph of Robert Mercer. Beside the photograph was a small bunch of blue flowers. Claire's mother's favorite. Before the ceremony began, Daniel stood beside the chair alone. He touched the photograph. I'm still angry with you. Then he smiled. But I understand. Across the room, Claire watched him. Years earlier, she had believed love meant making sure Daniel reached his future, even if she wasn't part of it. Now she understood something different. Love wasn't choosing someone's future for them. Love was telling them the truth and trusting them enough to choose. And Daniel finally understood the sacrifice too. For 8 years, he believed Claire's most painful act had been telling him, go without me. It wasn't. The most painful part was everything she did after he left. Sitting beside his dying father. Celebrating Daniel's victories from another state. Selling the last home her mother had left her. Paying a debt that had never belonged to her. And allowing Daniel to believe she was the villain because she thought his future mattered more than her reputation in his heart. But Robert had been right about one thing. Time is the one debt nobody can repay. You cannot return 8 years. You cannot undo the words that were said. You cannot revisit an airport and choose differently. But sometimes, if life is generous enough to put the same person in front of you again, you can stop asking how to recover the past and start asking what you are going to do with the time that remains. Now I really want to hear what you think. If you were Daniel, would you forgive Claire after discovering everything she sacrificed, or would the fact that she took away his right to choose be too painful to overlook? And if you were Claire, would you have told Daniel his father was dying and risked destroying the opportunity he had worked his whole life for? Or would you have done exactly what she did? Drop your answer in the comments because there is no easy choice in this story. If this story touched you, please like the video, share it with someone who believes love deserves honesty and second chances, and subscribe for more emotional stories about love, family, sacrifice, and the choices that can change an entire life.